We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Welcome into Tailgate. Austin Gayle here with Mike Renner in sunny Cincinnati, ready to rip it up. It's actually raining today. Weather stinks in Cincinnati, fun fact. On the Catch and Early Buzz, your boy was on Good Morning Football this morning.
Yeah,
Let's
you were.
freaking go. Shout out to the Master Gators and their support. I didn't wear the chain. I couldn't do it. I panicked at the last one. I even brought it in today. I brought in the chain. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then I was like, dude, I can't. It's not a part of me yet. You know, it's not a part of me. So I let a lot of people down with that.
I'll be on in a couple weeks. That was a high bar to clear. I mean, you had Kyle Brandt raving with you as it was going on. It was fantastic. You crushed it. Hats off to you, quite literally here. My hat just came off. But it's a high bar. I got to try to clear it. I got to try to one up. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to match it, though.
So some people are saying on there that I was dogging Emmanuel Sanders because I mentioned the Golden Tate comp with Sky Moore, and I was like, yeah, he got drafted a little bit ahead of Emmanuel Sanders. But it was a callback to the earlier in the show. They were talking about who are the 6 receivers that got drafted ahead of you, and they mentioned Golden Tate. So I was just trying to connect the show, guys. Sorry, this is business here.
It's called continuity.
It was pretty freaking sweet though. It was funny. They were cool. Getting on Good Morning Football was fun. For today, going to look at the wide receiver rankings. How many do you have listed out? I have like 22.
I don't know, man.
I want to add some more to my list. I have not watched guys like Danny Gray, only a little bit of Velus Jones. I've seen some Reggie Robertson, but I don't know where to put him. But there's some more guys I want to add to my list, but I'm excited to get into these receivers.
Well, once we get down there, I have it tiered. They're all called the tier 6 man tier. So
yeah, just a guy tier, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get in that tier with the receivers. And the take I have on this receiver class, honestly, is I do think it's a bit overrated. And I saw Lance Zierlein of NFL.com send out a tweet. He said, I'm going to say I don't think this receiving class is as good as it's being billed as. And I agree. I think there's a lot of high-end wide receiver twos in this class. There are a lot of high-end wide receiver twos in this draft class. I don't think necessarily there are legit alpha number ones. Like, I don't think I would have any of the receivers ahead of the top 3 last year, and Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, and Devontae Smith. And this year, Drake London is my wide receiver 1, spoiler alert, but there are other guys that I feel like, maybe they could be wide receiver 1s, true alphas at the next level, but I honestly see a lot of high-end wide receiver 2s.
Yes, I think we've been banging that table ever since like the start of
when Jahan Dotson was mocked in the first round.
Yes, so we've been saying that. We've been saying that the guys who are being listed as top 10 sort of wide receivers are not for my money top 10 type of picks any other year. And now I can see drafting them in the top 10 wide receivers, very valuable position. You know, it's see taking a chance on these guys, but I just don't think they're comparable to some top end talent from years past. But I do like the depth. I do think it is deep. That's kind of a trend of late, is having deep wide receiver classes. But I think this year, more so than others, it has deep size. It has bigger wide receivers as you get into day 2, whereas we've talked about that's not always the case.
And I have this list.
Whereas the smaller wide receivers kind of day 1 guys. The 180-pounders are the guys getting mocked in the first round this year.
And I have this list tiered out, but I don't even think there's that big of gaps between the tiers I even have, right? Like, I don't think there is like a hodgepodge of receiving talent that I'll get to in like tier 2 and tier 3 once we do get to that list. Before we do, we're going to mention that this podcast, the proud sponsor, is Manscaped. And I'm pitching this to you, Mike. They're the presenting sponsor.
Okay.
What if we got to do something live for them to keep them in season? Because it's only going through August, I believe. I think the presenting sponsorship's through August. What's your take on shaving your chest hair live on cam or something?
I thought I was going to get a little more PG-13 than that.
No, but so their whole tagline is, trust them below the waist. Why not trust them with everything else? Why don't we show them that we can bring the table here and shave your chest online?
I'll shave my chest. It's not a lot.
No, I shaved your chest.
Oh, you shaved mine?
You got to show that other people can do it.
I actually have a story about that. I shaved my buddy's chest hair my buddy Frankie. You met Frankie.
Yeah,
he's a large 350-pounder.
I wrestled
and he is
Frankie.
a hairy man. And we shaved his chest one night when he was asleep and maybe inebriated, but didn't actually shave the whole thing, just shaved a line down the middle.
Oh, wow.
He
So
did
we'll
not
go
love
maybe
that.
one line down the middle and
One
just
line down the
show.
middle.
And
I
maybe
don't
go
have a
versus
lot.
another razor. I just think the people here that watch live on YouTube want to see that. I honestly think that they're begging for it. So I'm going to present that to our sponsors lead, Counter Price, and see if that could land us another 12 months. I'm going to go ahead and pitch that. The only true guaranteed quality pickup this season is Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. With Manscaped Performance Package 4.0, your skill position will be sleek and smooth enough for a sub 4.3 40-yard dash. Support us and head to manscaped.com and use the code PFF at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Because of their ceramic blade and skin-safe technology, your nicks and snags will be reduced. In the season of trimming the roster, Manscaped will make sure cutting the right players and not any important pieces on your D. Look, fellas, don't fall off her draft board. The ladies out there think that long nose hair is a major turnoff. The Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer is your solution. Why not use the best solution for the job here? April is draft season, but it's also Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. Manscaped has partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to bring awareness to testicular cancer, men's health, and early cancer detection. Get 20% off and free shipping with code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. At manscaped.com and use code PFF. Turn your Mr. Irrelevant into a first-round pick with Manscaped. I want to turn your Mr. Irrelevant into a first-round pick on camera here. Secure the sponsorship long-term. Into our wide receiver rankings. You give your tier one, and then I'll give my tier one. We'll talk about the players that are in both.
My tier one is Drake London, USC, Jameson Williams from Alabama, and then Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. Those three guys, pick your poison, but I think that's the tier one that I am taking in this draft. That's the guys I think that have. I hate the wide receiver 1 versus wide receiver 2 distinction at the NFL level. Like, I think a lot of these guys can be 1,000-yard receivers, but those are the guys I feel most confident about having that wide receiver 1 ability.
My tier one, and I agree with you. Two of them are in my tier one. I have Drake London as my wide receiver 1. I also have my player comparison for him is Michael Thomas, actually, and I can talk about that more when I speak to his specific skill set and honestly where I think he's best utilized in the NFL. Jameson Williams is actually my wide receiver 3 in tier 1, and then I have Chris Olave as my wide receiver 2, which I honestly think, looking at this list that I have, I think it could bite me a bit. I know that the yak production just isn't there for Chris Olave, and honestly, I was considering putting Olave as my wide receiver 1. I like him that much. I think the concern is he's not a difference maker after the catch. What he does win, though, is the vertical routes down the football field, good speed, good polish, all this stuff, good hands, and I really do think the comp I have for him, Calvin Ridley, is the type of receiver he can be in the NFL. I don't think he'll put any parlays down necessarily, but I do think that he'll be a legitimate separator in the NFL, and that's what matters a lot. And of the guys that I think can actually separate down the football field and win valuable routes, Olave is one of my favorite receivers. So again, that's Drake London, Chris Olave, and Jameson Williams as my wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 in this tier 1.
Yeah, Olave for his career, 9 broken tackles in his career.
Yeah.
176 catches.
And his average yards after the catch per reception, I think, for his career is under 2 yards. Like, he's not a guy, again, it's very similar to Ridley. Ridley's production at Alabama and his production in the NFL is very little after the catch. It's not what he does best. What he does do, however, really high averages at the target, wins down the football field, can win against off coverage. And I do think teams will buy into that. But when you go back to this whole phrase that we've said 1,000 times, build your receiving core like a basketball court, like a basketball team, Olave fits a skill set that I think a lot of teams don't have. Like, you can get your yak guy, I think, a little bit later. You can get your bigger possession receiver that you want to feed the football. I think Olave comes in as this high-end wide receiver, too, that paired with Julio Jones, as we saw with Calvin Ridley, can be a legit 1,000, 1,200-yard type of receiver.
The one guy I want to talk about, and I really like Olave, he's top of my tier, too, but Jameson Williams has gotten not talked about. I mean, I guess he's gotten talked about. I hate policing discussion topics. You can talk about whatever the fuck you want, but Jameson Williams, if healthy, I think would have been wide receiver 1 in this draft class.
I 100% agree.
His speed on tape is just different than everyone else's. And you can, say, we couldn't even see the field of Ohio State. Obviously, like Olave and Garrett Wilson are better. They've started over him. It's like, that's not quite how player development works. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when guys are productive in a starting role, they're just not going to get passed up. When a guy's already been established and he's good, it's going to take a lot for a guy to get passed up in terms of a rotation, even if the guy behind him is better. So Jameson Williams, to me, is that difference maker everyone's looking for. And that not only fast, but who said this? Who was the guy? I should remember who it was, but can control that speed. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys are fast, but Jameson Williams you go back to that, the first Georgia game, the SEC championship game, his ability to alter his speeds within his routes to lull you to sleep and then burn you down the football field is what everyone is looking for at that position. So even with the ACL, I would not be surprised if he does still come off the board as wide receiver 1.
I'm a huge fan of Jameson Williams. I put in my notes here, moves different, like 3 or 4 different times. I think he's the best mover in this class, and that's not just speed for me, right? There are other guys that, arguably could have ran faster 40 times at the combine. Everyone brings up Christian Watson, and you look at Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, they both ran sub-4.3s or sub-4.4s, but Jameson Williams is a different mover. And again, I agree with you 1,000%. And if it wasn't for the late injury, literally in his last game of the season, I don't think you're getting this discount. And I think what's that going to result to? Someone getting an absolute steal. I think if Jameson Williams ends up coming off the board in the 12 to 17, 12 to 20 range, that is going to be a massive win for that team. I honestly don't feel he gets past the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm going back to the basketball team, Mike. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jameson Williams. That is such a complimentary set or trio of wide receivers that I think could compete for best receiving core in the NFL. That's how good I think Jameson Williams is. I think my comp for him I have is Will Fuller, and some people hate that comp. Will Fuller, he's got, doesn't have the injury stuff. That's not why I'm comping him to Will Fuller. Will Fuller's speed coming out of Notre Dame was absolutely different. Also have similar arm length, similar hand sizes as well, and I have less concerns about Jameson Williams' ability to attack the ball in his hands as much as I did Will Fuller coming out. So I think he's even could be a better Will Fuller when fully healthy. So Drake London 1, Chris Olave 2, Williams 3 for me. You have Drake London 1, Williams 2, and then Garrett Wilson 3. Let's talk about a little bit Drake London. Drake London I have as the comp for me is Michael Thomas. And some people hate that comp because he's bigger than Michael Thomas and he might run slower than Michael Thomas. I just feel that his usage in the NFL to be as successful as he can be will be this kind of power slot type of player. Now, that's not a knock on Drake London. I think Drake London can hang on the outside just as much as Michael Thomas can. But Michael Thomas still runs about 55 to 60% of his routes from the slot because that's where he's best utilized. Works the intermediate and short areas of the football field. 46% of Drake London's receptions in his career came within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. And he ate, right? He had a lot of success doing that. And I think having him do that in the NFL, not asking him to be a Mike Evans, right? This vertical downfield stretcher for an offense, I think is going to lead to the best production. And if you play him that way, as he was played really his entire USC career up until this last season, I think you're going to get the most productive receiver in this class. And that's why I have him as my wide receiver 1.
I mean, Michael Thomas is 6'3", 212 coming out.
Yeah, he's big.
Drake London 6'4", 219. That's better than Julio versus Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, fair.
It's not that crazy of a comp. Like that's a close size comp, and I like it, and I like the usage comp for him. So yeah, Drake London's wide receiver 1 because highest floor to me. Same reason Aiden Hutchinson's edge 1. It's what you're getting, and it's going to be a good player in a certain role.
Yeah,
and so that's why, and with even room to grow in the more valuable areas of the position. So
I do find myself with a lot of the players I'm high on. I think Desmond Ridder at quarterback, Aiden Hutchinson, the edge defender from Michigan, obviously, and Drake London at USC. It's that comment you made. I know what I'm getting. I know exactly what I'm getting with Drake London. I know exactly what I'm getting with Ridder, and I know what I'm getting with Hutchinson. And that has a ton of value when you talk to Steve Palazzolo, who's a product manager at PFF, also creates content on the NFL podcast. He brings up time and time again, all these teams are trying to do, and he works with all 32 NFL teams working on Ultimate and these other things. All these teams are looking to mitigate risk. Yeah. They want to check boxes. That's the most common expression. And when you have to project a lot of traits or project a lot of different things or project usage, it gets that much harder to do so. Next receiver I want to talk about is your wide receiver 3, my wide receiver 4. Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, for me, I felt is fantastic on tape. I comped into Emmanuel Sanders, who can just cut a rug and create separation, at the release point and at the stem. I think his footwork for me is a bit sloppy, and I think what he can be in the NFL is Emmanuel Sanders. I think he's got inefficient feet at times. I think that's where the foot fire and the dancing sometimes can be likened to like Jerry Jeudy type, right? Where I think Jerry Jeudy can be inefficient with his routes, but honestly create separation because he's so dynamic, and he's obviously better after the catch as well. I think he's one of the better yak receivers in this class behind Williams and Burks. But Garrett Wilson, I think he can be an Emmanuel Sanders in the NFL. I think it's a very similar size and athleticism comp as well.
Can we go back to when you said cut a rug?
Cut a rug?
Do you say that? I hate that term. I don't know what it means. I know it's like dancing, but
I think it's dancing.
To me, it's just I don't know why some terms just
like it's my opinion of it though is that Garrett Wilson term. On tape, I think you see a lot of some freelancing footwork, some inefficiency, and all that stuff. And and there may be some concerns too with like him getting off press. I think you want to move him around a little bit. I think what he can be in the NFL, I still think he needs to improve a ton as a receiver. But what he can be in the NFL is an Emmanuel Sanders type of player that like super consistent, consistently creates separation, can work on the outside and on the inside. I don't think he's there yet, and I think that's why I have him behind guys like Olave and Williams. But what he can be in the NFL is special, and I honestly do feel I'm still really high on him. I know wide receiver 4 has a negative connotation, but I think he's still very much so a top 20 player specifically in this class. Yes,
I've comped him to it's not really a comp, but I've said he could have a career arc very similar to Devontae Adams. And if you think about Devontae Adams, I don't think he went for over 1,000 yards until year 4 of his career, and then now he's the best receiver in the NFL. But like Devontae Adams coming out, 39.5-inch vertical, 4.51, 6'8", 2.3 cone, like athleticism for days. Like he had that the whatever it takes to become that high-end route runner. To me, Garrett Wilson is just the most talented athlete at the wide receiver position and what he can do physically. Now, why is he 183 pounds still? Why is he still struggle with press? Like there's a lot of question marks, especially considering Brian Hartline and the track record of the receivers he's had at Ohio State. That comes with that. And so he's not as sure a thing as, to me, Drake London and what you're getting with him and Jameson Williams and what you're getting with his speed. But he's tier 1 because of that ability is there. And at some point, if he's, puts in the work, it's going to result in elite level wide receiver play.
I agree. You'd be hard pressed to find me saying he's not capable of elite end wide receiver play. And I think all these guys at the top are. I think like I said at the beginning, I think these guys have high end wide receiver 2 type of ability. A lot of these guys do. Let's get to your tier 2 here.
Yes. Okay. My tier 2, I would stack it like this: Chris Olave, wide receiver 4; Sky Moore, Western Michigan, wide receiver 5; George Pickens, Georgia, wide receiver 6; and then Traylon Burks, Arkansas, wide receiver 7.
I like Olave at 4 there. I was going to get nervous. My wide receiver 2 falling down your board here. My tier 2 is Garrett Wilson, like I said, and then I have Traylon Burks at 5, Sky Moore at 6, and then George Pickens at 7. So similar to how you see it, you're a little bit lower on Burks compared to that and higher on Sky Moore. I guess let's start with Sky Moore there, your wide receiver 6.
Sky Moore, we've talked about him a ton. I don't want to gush too much more, but the guy is –
I talked to him about him today on Good Morning Football.
You did. The guy, some of the best hands in this draft class, behind only George Pickens, actually, in terms of drop rate over the course of his career. Some of the best after-the-catch ability in this draft class. Led the nation in broken tackles last year. Some of the best releases in the draft class. And, the competition level, you can criticize all you want, but he went up against Pittsburgh last year, and he went up against, what was the other one that he went? He went up against 2 Power 5 teams. I'm blanking on the other one. Mm-hmm. But did not, for a second, look like he just never got caught at the line of scrimmage. Never got caught at the line of scrimmage by anyone he was going up against. And despite being – Michigan was the other one. Despite being short, he's not small. Like, we're talking about Olave play strength concerns, Wilson play strength concerns. Talk about Jahan Dotson play strength and size concerns. He doesn't get out physical, Sky Moore. That is not a thing that you see on his tape. So ticks a lot of boxes in that regard. And then obviously is one heck of an athlete. So I'm very high on him. It's just he's the kind of guy, if he had gone to Ohio State, we could be talking about him the way we're talking about the other guys.
I was going to say, if he played for a Power 5 program, I think we were talking about him as a legitimate first-round player.
Yes, and the sort of he's in that mold of the smaller school guys. Like, they rarely go in the first round. They just rarely do. But the, Greg Jenningses of the world, who was a Western Michigan Bronco himself, who just, dominate at that level of competition, but you just aren't ready to draft him in the first round because it is still a low-level competition, and you do and have not seen it because he is only a junior. Didn't get to go to the Senior Bowl.
You mentioned a handful of really good things there, and I think the biggest one for me is that he's not small. He's not maybe as short as he's tall as you want him. He's 5'9" and 5'8". It's pretty much 5'10", but his arms are 31 inches, which is huge for the receiver position in the NFL. His hands are over 10 inches. That matters a ton. He's 195 pounds. That matters a ton. I don't think calling him small would be unjust. I have the comp for him as Golden Tate. I think Golden Tate could stick on the outside despite being a shorter player, not small, shorter player at the receiver position. He's also really good after the catch, creates separation at the release point and at the stem. Like, this is a receiver you should bet on. You should bet on Sky Moore. He's also a tough player, like a physical player. Yeah. I think teams will really like him. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the first round. Yeah. Now, there is probably...
Especially with the Packers getting another first-round pick and the Chiefs being at the back end there. Like, those are teams in need of wide receivers now.
So back to my tiered list here. It's Garrett Wilson at 4, my wide receiver 4, then Traylon Burks at 5, Sky Moore at 6, and then Pickens at 7. We're flip-flopped on Burks and Pickens. I guess speak to what you see in Burks and maybe a comparison you have for him and compare him to Pickens.
So I'll start with Pickens because I got him pulled up here. And the thing about Pickens that I I'll say underrated until I really saw all of his tape was just how good his ball skills were. And I talked about he has the lowest drop rate of any of the wide receivers in his draft class. 2 drops his entire college career. And the thing you didn't really get to see is because he only had 90 catches his entire college career. You really have to take it all in because he wasn't utilized. Obviously misses the majority of this year until the playoffs when he was quite obviously not healthy. Missed time his sophomore year as well. Has had suspensions in the past. There's a lot of just not as much tape, and a lot of the tape you're seeing on him is of him as a younger dude, but he just turned 21. And man, the way he attacks the football is exactly what you want from an X receiver on the outside. He goes, and despite being 195 pounds only, and that's obviously at 6'3", it's a little bit skinnier.
Yeah.
It's still within good range, but the guy plays such a physical game and has that almost Jamar Chase-esque ability where Jamar Chase isn't the biggest dude, but is as strong as an ox and is physical, and you're not getting the better of him. And no corner was getting the better of Pickens in terms of that hip-to-hip leverage battle. He was out-leveraging you consistently on the outside and just didn't have the sort of talent around him at the quarterback position to get him the ball consistently over the course of his career. So, yeah, I think Pickens could have been tier 1, would have been tier 1 if he plays a full healthy season this past year, just didn't have that.
Yeah, I think the stat is over 55% of his receptions he earned in his true freshman season there at Georgia. You just haven't seen a lot. The reps is something that concerns me a ton. I think some of the slight frame as well. The comp I have for him is Tyrell Williams, who I think had a lot of success early in his career. I think he was at Western Colorado or one of those schools, but he was a phenomenal receiver for the Chargers. Has fallen off due to injury of late. I don't think that's not the reason I'm making that comparison, but it's more the type of player that he can be. I like Pickens a lot. I like Burks a lot. I still see Burks as a little bit better than Pickens. I thought I'd flip-flop them ultimately. I've comped him to Laviska Shenault Jr. plus. He is, in my opinion, Burks. Burks is what we thought Laviska was going to be, right? Laviska, we thought, oh man, he's so explosive. He's rocked up. He could do so much after the catch. And I think he can learn the receiver position. And I think he can win on the outside. And he could run the route tree on the outside. You never saw it at Colorado. You know how many receptions Laviska Shenault Jr. had? True outside receiver, 20-plus yards downfield. 2. Traylon Burks had 11 this past season because he won as an outside receiver in the SEC. Now, some of those reps were against some low-level competition that, did play in the SEC. But still, you saw more of it than you did see at Laviska at Colorado. So as high as we were on Laviska, I think we should be that high on Burks because I do think that's the type of player he's going to be, what we thought Laviska Shenault Jr. could be, which, again, you can debate what value that is, but I think you play him in the slot. I talked to Sam Pittman, the head coach for Arkansas yesterday. He said that's his best role. Play him in the slot, and when you see an opportunity to impress, call a go. He said to me, so many of those go balls, to say if we saw cover 0, which we saw a lot of, we were throwing a go ball to Traylon Burks, and it's usually going to work 10 times out of 10. So I think him playing in the slot, I think he's going to have success.
Well, I think the ultimate difference between those two is in terms of projectable to the NFL. And I still believe in Laviska having a role in the offense this upcoming year for the Jaguars. Traylon Burks has a bigger wingspan than even Drake London.
Wow.
When you're looking at targets over the middle of the field, the size wingspan aspect comes into play massively. He is he can be a tight end in your offense, honestly, truthfully, with the size or usage-wise in what he does because of that wingspan, because he's so reliable on balls outside his frame. I liked Laviska's ball skills. I didn't think he would drop as many balls as he has so far in the NFL, and a lot of that's probably a confidence sort of thing that's been on his tape with the Jaguars. But even still, I like Traylon Burks' ball skills better projecting to the league in terms of what he can do. I do think Laviska's probably better after the catch, but you're probably getting a more reliable over the middle of the field receiver in Traylon Burks.
So that's tier 1. That's tier 2. On to tier 3. Before you give your tier 3, I'll go ahead and read mine. My tier 3 is Jahan Dotson is the wide receiver 8 in this class. I then have Alec Pierce, the University of Cincinnati receiver, is my wide receiver 9, then Justin Ross, and then Jalen Tolbert. Pretty much all of the bigger receivers and Jahan Dotson that have legitimate ball skills. I think the reason Dotson is ahead of Pierce, Ross, and Tolbert is I'm buying into just his ability to attack the ball. He is a outstanding ball catcher.
Sounds like your mommy.
Stop. I think that on tape, you don't see a lot of opportunities where he's in true one-on-one situations where you can see him stick and separate and stuff. But working the slot against a lot of off-zone coverage, and then also working on the outside against a lot of off-zone coverage, you saw a lot of success. I think Dotson is a player that I'm willing to bet on, not ahead of a lot of these other guys. Obviously, still down there at my wide receiver 8, but still the ball skills I'm going to bet on. I think he's good after the catch as well. I think he ultimately could outproduce where I have him ranked compared to some of these receivers. But I think Dotson to start is my top receiver in this tier 3.
See, with Dotson, there's not a great track record for guys.
There really isn't.
With that. That's the thing. To me, he's Kendall Wright-ish, where he's not dynamic enough to get by on his pure dynamism. Like he is a dynamic dude, but is not to the level of a Sky Moore, to the level of a Garrett Wilson. Like he's not. No. That he's not fast enough.
You want him to be, though, right? When you're watching his tape, don't you want him to be? Because he's got this kind of spectacular jump ability. I think he attacks the ball well, and there's so many times where I'm like, man, he is dynamic. And then you compare him to a more, Sky Moore of Western Michigan or Garrett Wilson. You're right.
John Dotson, 15 broken tackles on 143 catches the past 2 years. That's not a good rate. 20%. Is a good rate for wide receivers. I've written an article about the threshold of guys who meet 20% that are drafted in the first 3 rounds versus guys who don't meet the 20% threshold in the first 3 rounds. And it's 3 times the hit rate in terms of 1,000-yard receivers for guys who break that 20% threshold. So you want to be a little bit more dynamic in terms of after catch ability than Jahan Dotson has been. Not quite fast enough to be a pure speed guy at 4.43 coming out of the combine when it was a pumped up 4.43 with everyone blazing at the combine. And then at 178 pounds, you're kind of just limited to the slot. Like he is not a physical specimen in terms of the game he plays on the outside. So kind of tweener in a lot of ways. I still think he's very good. I still think he could be a reliable slot option, but what's his high end? Kendall Wright had 1,000-yard season over the course of his career after being a first rounder. I think that's kind of where I could see Jahan Dotson falling once he gets to the league.
So you have Jalen Tolbert as your top receiver in this tier 3, the South Alabama receiver. Talk about that.
Tolbert is interesting because not a guy recruited out of Mobile. So he's from Mobile. Not highly recruited, obviously, goes to South Alabama. And then even at South Alabama, goes from redshirt year to 60 yards as a redshirt freshman, 520 yards as a redshirt sophomore. It was his redshirt junior that he finally breaks 1,000 yards. That he finally breaks out. And then this past year is basically unguardable on tape. I don't know where his sort of physical development came or what his learning curve or developmental curve is like. It's a rare one to have success at the NFL level, but he also has the size, the wingspan, the deep ability, the speed. He ticks a lot of the boxes that you do like to see when you get to the NFL level. And for my money, he was the most impressive receiver in the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. So a lot to like. I just wish he was a true junior coming out. If he was a true junior coming out, we could talk about him as a first rounder, but the age factor to me is still an issue. Like I said, a lot to like. The speed, the size, the ball skills, the downfield ability, after the catch ability too, but just is an older prospect coming out 23 years old.
I think older prospect, right? And you mentioned the speeds, and I think it's good speed, but it's not elite speed, right? 6'1", 190.
All kind of above average athlete in pretty much every regard, but not an elite athlete in any way.
And so when you see an above average athlete, but not an elite athlete, obviously dominating the group of 5 level, you question, okay, 6'1", 194, 1.54 10-yard split and a 4.4 9.4-yard dash. That's an above-average athlete. That's in the 60th percentile. But are you going to see him against better competition, obviously, in the NFL, light it up? And at the Senior Bowl, I think there was reason to buy into that, and I think that's why he ultimately is a third-round type of player, because he just wins. He just wins at South Alabama. He won in the Senior Bowl. I'm not high on him in this tier 2, but I do have him in tier 3.
He was a diced-up 194, though, I will say. In terms of all the guys seeing him up close at the Senior Bowl, he had probably the least body fat on him. That guy could have – he could have put on 10 more pounds and still not looked fat by any means. So,
2 receivers that you have in your tier 3 left here is John Mechie, the Alabama wideout, and then Christian Watson, North Dakota State, who you are significantly lower on Watson than a lot of media right now. I am too. I don't even have him in this tier. But talk about Mechie and then Watson.
I think Mechie's kind of gotten slept on for, similar reasons to what I said about James Williams. When you tear your ACL, it's tough to really go to bat for a guy because you don't know what he's going to come back and be like. But he's kind of the mold of the Alabama receivers that we've come to expect over the past handful of years. Crafty as can be as a route runner. I thought he put on some good weight this past year at Alabama, got stronger, got featured more in the screen game, and you saw it, and went from 5 broken tackles in 2020 as a sophomore to 20 broken tackles in 2021 as a junior. So got featured in that more. I think he can play that role at the NFL level. I just don't see speed on his tape. I don't think he is a high-end, like at 5'11", 195, which is what he was listed at Alabama. You better have some downfield ability. I think he's more of like a 4-5 guy.
Yeah.
And that's not awful, but I think that's going to make him struggle to be a guy that you're going to trust as an sort of outside wide receiver. So I still trust the route running ability, but he may be more of a slot at the next level.
Do you hate this comp? I kind of see this player, though.
Okay.
Tylan Wallace, the guy who recently came out of Oklahoma State, where like the tape was really good, crafty route runner. He's a good ball, he catches the ball.
I didn't think Tylan Wallace was near the route runner that John Mechie.
Really? You think Mechie's a lot better? I
Yeah.
kind of like the Wallace comp. 5'11", 187. We haven't seen him test, obviously. Also, only 30 and 5/8 inch in arms. Anytime you're getting under the 31s, into the 30s, concerns there to consistently play outside receiver in the NFL. Let's talk Watson. Watson is in my tier 4 all by himself as the wide receiver 12 in this class. You have him, I think, just above that in your tier 3. But Christian Watson, the comparison I have for him is Chris Conley. Really good athlete, really good size. You turn on the North Dakota State tape, and it looks like a high school game. Mm-hmm. Like, he is burning corners he had created on multiple routes, like 14, 16 yards of separation. And it's because these guys are so bad. He's going against terrible cornerbacks, right? Mm-hmm. And he's creating a lot of separation. He's winning down the football field. He's objectively the best athlete, at least the fastest player on the football field. His quarterback is also awful. Watch the North Dakota State tape and tell me that quarterback's not bad. But North Dakota State tape is phenomenal, right? He's creating separation down the field. The worry I have immediately is the ball skills. Guy is not attacking the ball well. There's a route where he runs, I think it's like an 8 to 10 yard out, and like really brings the ball into the back of his, catches it here rather than catching it out in front. It lets the receiver get a little bit more of a contested situation. And you go back to the Senior Bowl, right? Okay, what about when he went against better competition at the Senior Bowl? I think overall there wasn't a lot of top end corners at the Senior Bowl. And if you go back and watch every route, and I watched every route he ran at the Senior Bowl, the cornerbacks he went up against weren't that good. Yeah. I mean, he was going against more small school corners, and he just really did.
That was actually the funny part about it. Is like he comes from a small school to go there to then face other guys.
Who was that corner he faced the most? It was the guy in the purple helmet from Wichita State or something, and he's dusting him because he's like 5'4". But I have not seen tape where Christian Watson is going against top flight corners, and I worry about his ball skills a ton. It's why I have the comparison to Chris Conley, a really good athlete, not great ball skills, and that's ultimately why Conley never really developed above what you're kind of expecting of him as an athlete.
Yeah, and he's a very good athlete, but like not a polished route runner by any means. We're not talking about like he got by on the athleticism because the level of competition. He didn't have to like refine his routes. He didn't have to do anything over and above expected as a route runner. And so to put numbers to these ball skills that we're talking about, 13.3% career drop rate for his career. I just said career twice. But I think only Josh Johnson from Tulsa had a worse rate in this draft class. And of like any guys who are real prospects. And not just that, 12 of 40 in contested situations for his career. So not only bad, does that suggests like attacking the ball, he is not doing it correctly. 12 of 40 at his size against the competition he's playing against, 30% rate for his career. That should be like 50 to 60 at minimum for a guy 6'4", 208. So those are concerning things. And those even showed up at the Senior Bowl when you did have to make contested catches. It did not look like the Traylon Burks of the world, the George Pickens of the world, the Drake Londons of the world. So that's why people are saying first round for this guy. I push back a little because there is a lot of development still to be had for Christian Watson. So.
All right, the other receivers that were in this tier for me, but not in this tier for you, we'll probably talk about him later, were Alec Pierce. I had him as my wide receiver 9. I comped him to DJ Chark. I think he's a really explosive player. The University of Cincinnati wide receiver. I think he's better than Watson. I think some people have Watson ahead of Pierce. I think Pierce is better. I worry a little bit about the route tree. He did not run a lot of different routes in Cincinnati, but I will say he was alone. Like the Cincinnati receivers were bad outside of Alec Pierce, and he won a lot of contested catch situations way more than Christian Watson did. And the other receiver I have in this tier is Justin Ross. I think Justin Ross is getting slept on a little bit. It's similar to Pickens in that we saw a lot of his best production as a true freshman there for Clemson, and it hasn't been there since due to injuries. But comp I have for him, Tim Patrick. I think he's a smooth route runner, attacks the ball well. I think he's just this guy that's good at everything that I do think in that tier 3, I like him as a round 3, round 4 guy.
Okay, let me talk about Alec Pierce. Get to my tier. He's in my tier 4. He's in my next tier. And he's very interesting to me because the athleticism, he goes to the combine, 4.40, 40-inch vertical, 41 inch vertical, 10.9 broad jump, like elite explosiveness for a 6'3", 211-pound receiver. 33-inch arms. Like, he looks prototype from a straight line perspective. But then you go back and you kind of start to go back and look at the tape, and it shows up that like when he gets a step on dudes to stack them in a heartbeat, he does it. He can get on top of you if you let him. But I keep going back to, he is at the University of Cincinnati playing Murray State, Miami of Ohio, UCF, Temple. He's playing this low level of competition. And in 14 games, he had 873 yards with a first-round quarterback. If you are, like, and as a senior, if you are that dude at that level of competition, you should be putting up 1,500. If you have that big of a physical advantage, and the things that he struggles with, contact, resetting, avoiding it in the first place, like getting guys to not get their hands on him. And then once he is contacted, actually playing through that contact and still maintaining his speed, he really, really struggled with. And he is just not dynamic whatsoever. When he tried to shake guys, make guys miss, it does not happen. So those are big worries to me. And again, I think that shows just in the production. If he was the guy who was capable of that, had that ability to him to any degree, he would have gotten pump screens. He would have been the featured in that offense, but he wasn't. And to me, that's probably the most glaring indictment of him, is just that 873 yards in 14 games with a first-round quarterback throwing it to him.
All righty. Should we move to the tier 5 now? The tier 5 of this is kind of where we're at.
Well, mine was tier 4.
Oh, mine was tier 4. But my tier 5 is Christian Watson by himself. I think we can get into your tier 4, which is
Calvin Austin from Memphis. So what wide receiver number are we at here? That's getting down to wide receiver 12. Calvin Austin from Memphis. 13 is Alec Pierce from Cincinnati. 14 is Justin Ross from Clemson. 15 is Romeo Doubs from Nevada. 16 is Kyle Phillips from UCLA. And then 17 is Khalil Shakir from Boise State. Calvin Austin is probably the most interesting receiver in this class to me, because he's a freak athletically. His acceleration once he gets the ball in his hands is the best in this draft class. And he's the best pure gadget guy, but he is 5'8", 170. But unlike, so 4.32 at the combine, 11.3 broad jump, 4.07 shuttle, 39-inch vertical, all of it, all elite, as good an athlete as you'll see at 5'8", 170. But unlike most 5'8", 170 guys, he spent 93% of his routes from the outside last year. 93% of his routes. 90.5% of his routes. He was not a slot guy. He was not getting pumped these fake targets. He had to win down the football field. He had to win one-on-one a lot, and went for still 1,145 yards, 8 touchdowns, a lot of explosive catches on his tape. But still, 7 of 25 in contested catches this year, 9 of 27. Like, he is not Tyreek Hill in terms of what he can do physically at the catch point. He may look it in terms of what he is athletically. He is a close replica of that elite athleticism, but the ball skills and the sort of the attacking nature that Tyreek Hill plays with, I don't quite see with Calvin Austin. So it's a difficult mold to be able to overcome at that size. But I do still think that he deserves a little bit more love in this draft class, and I could see him being like a second-round sort of pick in this year because of that.
I have in my tier, I guess 5, this is John Mechie, wide receiver 13. We talked about him. I have Khalil Shakir, the Boise State wide receiver, actually comp to Christian Kirk, and then Calvin Austin Jr., and then Bo Melton. We'll talk a little Bo Melton. I think Bo Melton's going to be one of my guys this year. I do like Bo Melton a lot, the Rutgers wideout. But for Calvin Austin, the comp I have for him is Jakeem Grant. I mean, that's the type of athletic ability he has. That's the type of size he has, and I think you're going to use him that way. As much as he ran 90% of his routes on the outside at Memphis, I just don't see that happening in the NFL, right? I think the comparable from a height perspective and where he could ultimately go should be closer to what we thought with Rondale Moore, right? This is group of 5 Rondale Moore. He has had that production there at Memphis. He has that athletic ability, and the size is still a concern. That size is going to be so much of a concern that I do think it pushes him down as like the slot-only type in the NFL. But because he did have success on the outside for Memphis, maybe you do start to consider him as more than that. He is going to be someone that people bet on, though, because you don't find those type of athletes, regardless of how big he is. You just don't find those type of athletes, say, after day 2. That's for sure. So, what's your opinion of Khalil Shakir? I had him as my wide receiver 14.
Okay, Shakir, he has some serious drop issues. on his tape, has had them pretty consistently, over a 10% career drop rate for him, but also makes some spectacular contested catches. To me, I'm not a massive fan because he is a slot only, and while I like him as a route runner, I don't think he is all that dynamic of an athlete. So a slot only who's not particularly dynamic as an athlete to me is just like, and doesn't have a massive frame, obviously sub 30-inch arms, not a huge catch radius sort of guy. That's a limited player in my opinion. And so I have Kyle Phillips as the probably top like true slot receiver in this draft class, a guy who, you're not ever going to really play on the outside. And that's how I feel about Shakir. Like Jahan Dotson, I think you could get by with him on the outside, but like Kyle Phillips isn't going to play anywhere else but the slot, the UCLA wide receiver. But I think he can do it very, very well. 6.75 3 cone, 4.09 short shuttle. Those are the numbers you want to see for a guy who's going to survive there. Very gifted route runner. And to me, just a little bit more reliable a receiver over the course of his career, and similar sort of route running chops to a Khalil Shakir.
I don't have Kyle Phillips in this tier. I actually have him a little bit lower. I'm not as high on Kyle Phillips.
He's the guy who had the touchdown against Stingley this year, Kyle Phillips did.
Oh, wow.
That was the Stingley.
He also was talking a lot. Was he at the Senior Bowl?
He was at the Shrine Bowl.
He was talking a lot of smack at the Shrine Bowl. That guy's a chirper for sure.
Yeah.
So going out of my tier here of Mechie, Shakir, Austin, Melton, to finish with Melton, I think Bo Melton is getting slept on. Former 4-star recruit, legitimate athlete, 4.3 speed, from Jersey, had offers to go to bigger schools than Rutgers, right? Had offers to Michigan and other bigger schools. He decides to stay in Jersey, go to Rutgers. He's going to be on tomorrow's podcast. I interviewed him after I ranked him as wide receiver 16. Comp I have for him is Eddie Royal. I think he can play in the slot and have a ton of success. He told me teams see him as this slot type that can offer speed. I also think he has more polish to his game than some of the other receivers in this class. That's for damn sure. So Bo Melton, I think, is going to be one of my guys that on day 3, I think you're investing in a slot receiver that can have legitimate production early on.
Yeah, so I put him in tier 5. We'll get to that in a little bit, what exactly all goes on in that tier. But I think I love the athlete. You see the acceleration on his tape. The thing about him was on tape, I saw, I don't want to say a more raw guy, but like a guy who still was like figuring it out as a route runner. And then he goes to Senior Bowl and looked very different. He had that almost who was the Baylor wide receiver, Denzel Mims-ish sort of difference between his tape at Baylor and then his tape at the Senior Bowl when he kind of got to freestyle a little bit more and get after it in that regard. So I go back and forth, and because of that, he makes my tier 5. But I can see being high in him because of the athleticism is certainly there for a guy like Bo Melton.
On to my, I think now tier 6, which is interesting. I put David Bell and Romeo Doubs in the same tier. Comps for both Tandon Doss for David Bell and then Rashard Higgins for Romeo Doubs. David Bell, the athlete, is not great. And are you going to play him in slot because he can't really create on the separate? Like, that's why I see the Doss comparison. He's a bigger wide receiver that's slow and unathletic that has good ball skills. Like, he can attack the ball. Good ball skills in contested catch situations, but you're still not, like, raving about this guy like you are Dotson's ball skills, who I think has some of the best ball skills in this class. And as for Doubs, I just didn't see an elite anything, right? I think he did create separation there at Nevada. I thought he had some success, but like going back to the Senior Bowl looked way slower than you want to see a receiver look. Struggled to create separation on the outside, even where Watson was. So I don't love either of those receivers. I see them better than some of the other types I have below. I'll kind of finish out my rankings here. Wan'Dale Robinson, the really short-armed Kentucky wideout. Then I have Kyle Phillips, like you said, the UCLA receiver, Josh Johnson of Tulsa, Kevin Austin Jr., Notre Dame, and then to close us out, Javon Healy, is I think could get further down our list, the Coastal Carolina receiver, if I watch some more receivers, but that is kind of the roundout I have on my list. I can start with the two I mentioned, David Bell, Romeo Doubs. Yeah, so
I'll talk about those, and I'll throw in Justin Ross into that mix too, because I think they all have athleticism concerns. Bell is just, to me, below the threshold of like athlete that you want. I just don't think I don't care how crafty you are and how physical you are, ball skills, whatever, like he's just not, he just doesn't have the juice. He doesn't have the juice, in my opinion, to go to the NFL level and still be able to produce anywhere close to the level he did in college. And now he is a young guy, junior coming out, 21 years old, but 4.6, 540. 33-inch vertical, 9.10 broad jump, 4.57 shuttle, 7.14 3-cone. None of those numbers above the 27th percentile for a wide receiver. And it's not like he's 6'5", 225. he is 6'1", 212. So great production, but the tape just it never showed that. It never showed any sort of that. So Justin Ross, he's in a similar boat of not that athletic, but he is 6'4", 205, and probably after missing the sort of time he did, the developmental time with that neck injury, probably can still get bigger, has the frame to get up to like 215, 220, and be that sort of power forward at that position that can get by if you're not an athlete. But his testing, similarly concerning, 4.6, 440, a 1.76 10 split, which is the worst we've ever seen actually for a wide receiver. 9.8 broad jump, 32-inch vertical. Those are kind of yikes numbers. But I still think he actually got off the line a little bit better than David Bell did. And then Romeo Doubs, he actually hasn't tested pre-draft. On tape, he has more juice than the other two guys. Like, he's separated down the football field better. But I will agree the Senior Bowl was concerning. Now, some of it did come after. I think he actually did get hurt early on in the Senior Bowl, and that's why he has not tested, played through it that week of practice, has not tested since because of an injury. But 6'2", 201, I think he gets off the line really well for a guy on the taller side for a wide receiver, has a big catch radius. But again, level of competition was weak. He was beating up bad guys and then goes to the Senior Bowl and doesn't quite look the same. So those were all concerning numbers for me, but I still keep him in the tier 4, somewhere outside the top 100, just outside the top 100, going to end up on the PFF draft board because I still think on tape was fairly solid.
What do you make of Kevin Austin Jr.?
Okay, let me get to my tier 5. So tier 5, I called it the flawed tier of these guys have something to offer. That's where David Bell ended up because I really like David Bell's ball skills, really like him after the catch, but he's flawed in that he's not a good athlete. Kevin Austin's kind of the complete opposite of David Bell in that his tape is very meh. Like, nothing to get excited about really whatsoever. Like, there's no
I double
trump card on his
checked
tape.
that we had. So I was watching the cut up of Kevin Austin, knowing that he's this athlete, and I double checked that I was watching the right guy because you don't see any of that explosiveness or any of that wow power. I don't even know what that is, wow power, but I got it. I just don't see it on his tape.
Yeah, I mean, he tested out similarly in terms of like explosive testing to Alec Pierce and doesn't look anything like that. You never saw him stack guys on tape, like get off the line of scrimmage and then really just get on top of them and run away. Never, despite going 4.43 at 200 pounds at the combine. So that's all very odd to me. So he's in the flawed tier. Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky's in the flawed tier because the shortest arm, just tiny catch radius for a guy that matters once you get to the NFL. You're going to have to make plays outside your frame. I struggle to see him as much more than ever being a gadget player. I threw Tyquan Thornton, the fastest man at the combine, the Baylor wide receiver, into this tier because, my Lord, in a straight line, insane. But he couldn't even be productive down the football field at Baylor. He wasn't even putting up deep numbers at Baylor. Small hands, but he's 6'2" with 33-inch arms. But he's also 181 pounds, like a weird frame, 4.28 40. 10-10 broad jump, 37-inch vertical, but then he goes 7.25 3-cone, a 4.39 shuttle. Like, the dude can't turn to save his life. So he is a pure straight line guy, similar kind of projection-wise to what you're hoping is like an Anthony Schwartz coming out last year out of Auburn, that you're just praying you're just using him as a pure speed guy and don't think he'll ever be too much more than that. I threw Bo Melton into this tier for previous reasons previously stated, and I also threw Josh Johnson into this tier, the Tulsa wide receiver who I love his ability to get it open, but he runs 4.62. I think his shake and the ability to make you miss. He had a play against Ohio State. That was one of the most insane reps. I can't remember the exact defender, but the defender is about a foot from him at a standstill and doesn't even touch him. They're both at a standstill and does not even touch Josh Johnson. It was an insane rep. He has the movement skills that, like, you cannot coach, but he is another guy with disastrous hands. And not just 13% drop rate for his career, which is pretty rough, but every catch he does make is hitting his chest, is a body catch every single time, which is only going to lead to more drops at the NFL level when guys are throwing rockets into you. So very much worry about his ball
I feel like
skills.
you'd like my comp. This is a deep cut. My comp for Josh Johnson is someone I really liked coming out of Florida State. I just loved how he could get open. He was a consistent producer for them. Rashad Green Sr. ran really slow, was really small. I don't know if you watched Rashad Green coming out, but I think he got drafted by the Jags at some point and never really panned out in the NFL. But like his tape was awesome, and he like consistently created separation. But he was a skinny dude and didn't run fast. And honestly, I think you saw that show up in the NFL.
And then that's kind of it in terms of we got the Mets here that I would throw Eric Uzukanma from Texas Tech, Makai Polk from Mississippi State, Javon Hiley from Coastal Carolina, Reggie Roberson from SMU, Velus Jones from Tennessee, who's 27 years old, Charleston Rambo from Miami, Jalen Naylor from Michigan State, who we talked about, and then Danny Gray from SMU as well. So those are your tiers. That's how I would stack it up. Should we do some superlatives?
Let's get
for this
to
draft
the
class?
superlatives. Best deep threat, route runner, releases, after the catch, at the catch point, hands, athlete, slot, and gadget player.
Let's do it. Best deep threat. No real I guess there probably could be a debate here, but Jameson Williams, when healthy, it wasn't close last year. It really wasn't close. Best route runner to me is Chris Olave.
My guy.
Your guy. I do think he is probably the best route runner. I would consider some other names for this, but Olave, 4 years pedigree, and even as a sophomore when he first really broke on the scene, he was a very talented route runner. So him, best releases. This one I wasn't sure exactly where to go. But the guy said Sky Moore from Western Michigan, he never got. Like if you never get got, and now it is Western Michigan tape still, it's hard for me to really say anyone else because pretty much everyone else, even like some of the top end guys in this class, would get got at some point. And now he didn't face Sauce Gardner. He didn't face the top end corner, so still holding off on that. But you watch his cut ups, and then I'm not sure there's a lot of people that would be jamming him. So he's that. Best release, that was best releases. Best after the catch, I went Calvin Austin from Memphis.
I pushed back a little bit there. I think Calvin Austin's phenomenal after the catch. I think the other guys that we should bring up here, though, are Jamison Williams and Traylon Burks. I think both those guys are phenomenal after the catch, too. Burks is, I think, going to be used so much near the line of scrimmage in the NFL because of what he can do after the catch and the explosiveness and the tackle breaking ability. And with Williams, I mean, he has similar yak production as Ruggs did coming out. And I remember Ruggs, people raved about what he could do after the catch and what he could do if you used him at that short and intermediate level. I think Austin's great too, but I think honorable mentions at the least should be Williams and Burks.
Yes, Williams, Burks, Garrett Wilson, Sky Moore, all tremendous after the catch, all kind of like different in the way they win too after the catch. Even like Drake London is very good after the catch in like the way he wins physically. So there's a lot of guys who are good. I went Calvin Austin because I think he can actually break tackles as well as really hit home runs. Like you get him with the crease, and he is, like I said, right up there with the fast receivers in this draft class. So hotly debated that one, but I went Calvin Austin. Best at the catch point, this being like contested catches, playing through physicality, that sort of thing. I went Drake London, and then I kind of hedged by saying best hands is George Pickens. And we said why. George Pickens, lowest drop rate, love his hands. If you've not seen the one-handed catch he made in practice, have you seen that one?
Yeah, I have seen it.
Out of this world.
There's so many sideline catches specifically, and I wonder if we could add a superlative of best like sideline catcher. His sideline catches are insane. He is really good at keeping his feet in bounds. There's so many times where even if he's like just missing his feet in bounds, he makes a lot of really impressive snags. I like him for best hands. Yeah,
the more I really watched his ball skills, the more I'm like, you know what, this guy could end up a first-round pick. It's pretty insane. So he is the best hands, freakiest athlete. This one was just pure testing. Christian Watson was an all-time athlete for the wide receiver position.
It was an all-time combine.
All-time combine. 11.4 broad jump was it? 4.37 40. He is a freak of nature at 6'4", and that's why you're getting first-round sort of hype for him. Best slot, already said this, it's Kyle Phillips of UCLA. I just think he is very crafty. Has that slot feel that you want at that position, and he may never be more. He's not going to ever be more than that, I don't think, and I don't think you're going to expect more than that. But if that's a role in your offense, Patriots, Josh McDaniel.
Yeah.
But that's something that they'll covet. Best gadget player, I went back to Calvin Austin for this because there's not a lot of gadgets. This isn't a gadgety class like last year's was, but he's probably the best in this.
I agree. I think best slot, I think there will be a handful that compete for that, right? I think a lot of the gates, depends on where you use Drake London and Traylon Burks, right? If you see these guys moving in the slot at a high level, I think those guys could ultimately be the best slot. But it's an interesting receiver class. I'm excited to see how it all pans out, but also really adamant that I don't think it is chock full of future wide receiver ones. I think it's a lot of guys that can stick it out as wide receiver twos or second options in an offense. I think that's going to do it, man. I don't think we have time for the delete the tweet generational prospect bracket. Or do you want to try and squeeze it in?
Let's squeeze it in.
All right, delete the tweet. I purposely did not include a tweet on this because on Monday it was not great. I did not. Or Tuesday. I kind of got forgot.
Got your delete the
I put
tweets.
myself in a body bag a little bit. I think we have to slow down and then delete your tweets. What is this one?
Okay, so this was because we're doing the cornerbacks in the generational prospect bracket. So I went with cornerback take that has not aged great. And I even kind of said it though. I said I don't want to overact the preseason. But Josh Jackson and Jair Alexander look like home runs so far. 2018, August 25th. 645 likes. Got the people going. And then Josh Jackson might be out of the NFL here soon.
Josh Jackson, I was doing some research today on Derek Stingley because his pro day was today and people are reacting to that. But he has the single highest graded season of any Power 5 cornerback in the history of PFF college.
He had ball production that year for
Yeah.
days. What is it, like 19 pass breakups, like 7 picks or something?
That's so much of what those production grades are, right?
Yeah.
It's getting your hands on the ball and all that stuff. I think Kobe Bryant graded better than Ahmad Gardner for that reason this past year because of that ball production. But on to
Cornerback, generational prospects.
Generational prospects, cornerback position.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
So we've done this. We actually skipped 1 week, but we do this every week where we go through the top-ranked cornerback from every year that we're doing this. 8 years have been grading college football, projecting the NFL, and pit them against each other to reign the generational prospect of the PFF era. Cornerback position, first year, we didn't have anyone really high in the mock draft we did. So we didn't have a bracket the first year, a board the first year. Jalen Collins, LSU, the guy who got suspended for steroids, I believe, out of the NFL already, was 27th. He had some weird off-field issues, though. He was 27th on that mock draft. Jalen Ramsey, the next year, 2016, was the third-ranked player on our board. Marshawn Lattimore, 2017. The fourth-ranked player on our draft board, Josh Jackson, RIP. Maybe I probably shouldn't say that, but was the eighth-ranked player on the draft board in 2018. Byron Murphy, sixth-ranked player in 2019.
I love Byron Murphy.
Still good. He was good last year. He
Yeah.
had a good year. Jeffrey Okudah was the fourth-ranked player in 2020. Hopefully his Achilles is back healthy this year because he was actually looking good prior to that. Patrick Surtain, 13th-ranked player in 2021. And then Derek Stingley Jr., the third-ranked player after his pro day today when he went 4.4 with his weird-ass 38.5-inch vertical and 10.2 broad jump.
We didn't talk about that
like
on the Catch and Early Buzz, but his vertical, so he looked like he was just going through the motions with his broad jump and his 40, but his vertical, go back and watch that video of him doing his vertical. He doesn't do any wind-up, really. He just
kind of just jumps.
bunnies up.
He just like stand there and it's just like all of a sudden he goes.
And he goes 38 inches.
Yeah.
It looks like he's flying.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah. He looks effortless. It was an effortless 38 inches. It was insane.
Interesting athlete for sure. But
all right, so Collins versus Stingley. We're leaning Stingley, obviously.
Duh.
That's not even a question. Jalen Ramsey versus Surtain in round 1. Could this get Surtain off already?
The right side of the bracket, so we're looking at it here. You guys can't see it, but the right side of the bracket is Jalen Ramsey, Patrick Surtain, Marshawn Lattimore, and Jeffrey Okudah, just from how the years shook out to where that's a murderous row.
That is.
But to me, it's got to be Jalen Ramsey.
Really? Surtain was awesome, though. But it sucks to see Surtain go out in round 1.
Jalen Ramsey was versatile already in college. Like he played outside 1 year. I believe his last year he ended up playing the slot, or was it the year prior to his last year? But he had already played multiple positions, graded out exceedingly well at all of them. True junior coming out, elite athlete testing-wise, had just shown a bunch on tape at Florida State to where, it was a sophomore year he played slot. He started at safety, then the slot, then the corner, graded out elite at every single one of them. And that's where we were like, all right, this guy is a monster. And, well, he has been. So Jalen Ramsey, I think, takes that one.
I will be really, really surprised if Okudah doesn't pan out, man.
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
really, really surprised. I know we're going to talk more about Okudah, but Ramsey, I think that's fair. I think Surtain versus Jalen Collins would have won that first round matchup.
He would have won a lot of
Yeah,
matchups.
he would have won a lot of matchups. So now next one is Okudah versus Lattimore.
Okudah versus Lattimore is a tough one because Lattimore was a one-year wonder. He came out in 2017 with fewer than 1,000 snaps to his name. He had not played a ton of football. And even his last year, 678 career snaps, only 1 year as a starter. But that year, the lone year as a starter, he allowed 226 yards. 40 targets, 18 catches he allowed in his final year of college. And on those 40 targets, he had 9 pass breakups and 4 interceptions. Insane ball production. I was like, it runs a 4.36 at 6 foot 190. It just like, I don't know how the guy didn't see the field until he did, but he was so damn good that last year that was just could excuse away any sort of needing to see guys for a longer period of time. I think he was more dominant at his peak than Okudah, so I lean Lattimore, but I could see going Okudah too for the multiple years of production.
I'd probably lean Okudah, even though I think it'd be revisionist to say Lattimore, because I think Okudah, we were so high on Okudah. And then you go back, I was looking up his
So they were
measurables.
both fourth on our draft board, I will say. So they were both right up there.
I think part of it too is I wasn't really here for the Lattimore year,
Okay.
so I wasn't really grinding it. But go back to Okudah's measurables.
Yeah, he had the biggest wingspan,
Dude,
biggest hands.
It was 6'1", 205 with 32 5/8 inch arms and 78 5/8 wingspan. Like built in a legitimate lab to play the position.
Yeah.
Great production in a man-heavy scheme. I think we lean Okudah here.
All right, I'm going to Okudah. Last first-round matchup, we got Josh Jackson versus Byron Murphy.
Oh, wow. I was never that high on Jackson. I know you were. I was higher on Murphy than I would be on Jackson.
I was actually higher on Denzel Ward that year than Josh Jackson. Sam Monson was pumping the Josh Jackson train.
Uh-oh. So
That
you're
is-
blaming,
that was before I had
you're
draft board
blaming
control.
Sam for Josh Jackson.
I am, actually. But, I mean, I still love Josh Jackson. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, like, eschewing. I always fuck that word up. Responsibility here altogether. But I would have gone Denzel Ward in that year.
So you're leaning Murphy.
I'm leaning Byron Murphy, but I can – Murphy was 6th on the draft board. Josh Jackson was 8th. So the draft board would say Byron Murphy. So we're going to go lean Byron Murphy here. Next matchup is Derek Stingley versus Byron Murphy. We don't even have to debate that one.
Yeah.
Derek Stingley. And then Jalen Ramsey versus Jeffrey Okudah.
Ramsey.
It's a debate, but I don't think it's that much of a debate. It's Jalen Ramsey. Now, this one's the one where I could see Derek Stingley, like, he could have been a better prospect than Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah. I don't think,
But
it's,
I
I
think
don't think it's a competition now.
I think you'd be out of your mind to take any other prospect, though, even if you're higher on Sauce Gardner, who was excellent all 3 years, over Jalen Ramsey as a prospect. I still to this day cannot believe Ezekiel Elliott went ahead of Jalen Ramsey in that year's draft.
I can't either.
All time, like, even at the time, I said the Cowboys have to be running in the card. I tweeted, they have to be running in the card for Ramsey, right? Then after they did, I said the Jaguars have to be running the card for Ramsey, right? Jaguars did it.
Do you think the Cowboys, having now paid Ezekiel Elliott as much as they have, would rather have had Ramsey or Zeke? It's a good question, right? And what do you think?
Well, that's up for debate. I mean, Zeke was up there. Did he make the finals of the running back prospect bracket?
I think he might.
No, he lost to Dalvin Cook in the second round. So we're gonna lean Jalen Ramsey as your generational cornerback prospect.
You love to see it. I love that exercise. It has been fun. Until next time, tomorrow we got Bo Melton join the show. That's going to be pretty sweet. And I think we go on to offensive line. Offensive line rankings is where we got to hit now.
Yes.
Let's go offensive line rankings when we go tomorrow. Thanks for everyone. Appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as we continue to press forward here. Austin Gayle, Mike Renner, Tailgate.